Well, hey everybody, it's Dave Isaacs coming at you from the new guitar studio. I recently moved my location off of historic Music Row, I'm sorry to say, but I'm very happy to say that my new location in the Sobro district of Nashville is just way cool. I'm in a fantastic collective, creative, shared space. I got a new office. I haven't even put up any decorations yet. You see there's nothing on the walls, but I'm getting there. I've been here less than a week, and I'm really psyched about it. I'm going to be doing all kinds of cool events here, and you're going to see more videos about that. But today this is a lesson video. This is a beginner's lesson video, a very, very simple one. I'm going to show you the first song that I teach a beginner. And it's a very familiar one, or it should be a very familiar one, either to you or maybe to your parents, depending on your generation. It is a two-chord song. That is all there is to the whole thing. And what's nice about this is that it introduces not just a couple of simple shapes on the guitar neck, but a way for you to think about how you learn chords and how you learn how to transition between chords. That's really an important thing. You also learn something about a particular rhythmic pattern. So, here's what's going on. The song is A Horse with No Name by the group America from 1975, I believe, something like that. And all we're doing is this. That's the entire song. So, real simple. We're starting with an E minor chord. Now, if you're not an absolute beginner, I'm pretty confident that you know this, I'm using my middle and ring fingers to play the 2nd fret of the 5th string and the 2nd fret of the 4th string. Now, some people do like to use index and middle to play E minor. I'm not going to tell you that's wrong. I don't believe that it is, but I'm going to tell you why I like this better. And if you try this yourself, I think you'll feel the difference. In terms of the way the hand is made, in terms of the ergonomics of the hand, which is really my criteria for what makes a fingering better, basically a more efficient fingering or a stronger fingering as opposed to a less efficient or a weaker fingering. You actually have more power naturally between the thumb and these two fingers, middle and ring, than you do between the thumb and middle index. And if you put those together, this pair of middle ring against the thumb versus this pair of middle index, you should feel the difference in how secure and powerful this is. You'll feel more power and the ability to create more pressure this way. You have to work harder to get the same amount of pressure from index middle. So I find this is a more efficient fingering, and it works very nicely with lots of other chords, which is something else I'm going to talk about in a second. I want you to also notice my hand position. My fingers are curled, which means that every knuckle is bent. And so I'm sitting very much on the fingertip. You can probably see the mark from the strings on my fingertips. And the way that I like to describe this is that it's as if you were hanging off the strings. You imagine, say, a picture on a hook, the way that the wire sits on that hook. So it's sort of the opposite, because your fingers are the hook and the string is the wire. But the idea is that I can take my thumb off the back of the neck and kind of wiggle my arm back and forth and move the strings that way with very little pressure. It's just natural leverage that comes from the hand hanging off of that spot. So to get comfortable with that, what you might want to experiment with is just taking even just one finger, say the middle finger, and touching the 2nd fret of the 5th string. Sit on the fingertip, make sure the fingers are rounded. Your thumb is going to poke up behind the back of the neck. How much depends on the shape of your hand and how long your thumb is. What's actually more important than the thumb is the wrist. And this is where the balance idea is going to come in. You keep the wrist basically straight, you let the fingers curl, you let the thumb fall where it falls, and just keep that hand relaxed, and you should be able to just hang off that E minor chord. Strum all 6 strings. Now, the 2nd chord is this. Now, technically, if I'm going to name it, it's a D6-9 over F sharp. You don't necessarily need to worry about that, and it's not like you're going to see that chord very often if you ever see it at all. But essentially, if you're an absolute beginner, all I want you to know is that it's a variation on a D chord, which goes like this, which is index here on the 3rd string 2nd fret, middle here on the first string, 2nd fret, and ring on the 2nd string, 3rd fret. Again, notice fingers are curled, thumb is up, and I strum this time 4 strings. So that's D. Here is the chord from Horse with No Name. We're still going to use this note on the 3rd string, 2nd fret, but it's played with the ring finger. And then the middle goes across to the 6th string, 2nd fret, and we play all 6 strings. So here's D. Here's this chord. Obviously they don't sound the same, but what this really is a D chord with the notes rearranged instead of You don't have to understand the theory any further than to just hear that I've taken a high note and made it a low note, and then kept some of the middle notes in between, and then added other notes that don't usually belong to a D chord but add some nice color. And those work so nicely because they're in the E minor chord. And so we get what's called a drone, notes that don't change while others do. Now, I said that we were going to talk about how you practice transitioning chords. Generally, your fingers are going to move in one of a handful of ways. They're going to move together in the same direction, they're going to move in opposite directions, or they're going to move obliquely where one moves and one doesn't. And your fourth option is where the hand is actually going to rotate a little bit to sort of flip the orientation. Whether we're talking about where you have fingers on the same fret, which forces you to turn a little bit this way, or stretched out over several frets, which forces you to turn a little this way. And that's a topic that I can get into in a subsequent video because there's a lot to delve into. But the main thing I want you to take away is that there's just a handful of ways the fingers are going to relate to each other. In this case, we have an opposite movement. So remember, the E minor is 2 notes side by side, the middle finger and the ring finger, both on the 2nd fret of the 5th string and the 4th string, and I strum all 6 strings. Now all I'm going to do is move them away from each other. So the ring goes this direction from string 4 to string 3. The middle goes this direction from string 5 to string 6. So it's an opposite movement. Bring them together, move them apart. So as you're practicing a transition, it's really helpful to identify that move, figure out which type of move it is, and then without even strumming, just watch your fingers, and you're going to practice it like this. You start with the first chord, the E minor, strum. Then break this down into component movements. Release the pressure, so you're still touching but not holding the notes down. You come off the strings and you picture your target notes. In other words, in your mind, you're visualizing where you're going to land. It's almost like in your head, the notes you're going to are going to light up so you can hit that target. And then you land. So it's release, visualize where you're going, go there, land. Release, visualize where I'm going, move apart, land, and strum. Then we do it in time. 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, if you're really a beginner and this is new to you, or if you struggle with changing chords, you may need more time to get to the new chord and to hit that target accurately. You can always slow down, but the thing I want you to think about is when you release. In other words, within that 4 count, right now I'm doing this. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, and. So I'm not taking a lot of time to get from point A to point B. You can always start to move sooner. For example, 1, 2, 3, release and move. 1, 2, 3, release and move. 2, 3, release and move. Release and move. I don't know if you could hear the train just now. That's one downside of this new location, but that's okay. It's just adding color. I kind of like that this is more of an urban environment here. In any case, if that's still not going to do it, then obviously if you have to take too much time to change, you really won't be able to strum. So just look at this as the first stage of practice, just to get the movement. Even if you have to do this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, and moving in slow motion. 2, 3, 4. Again, noticing. Move together, move apart. That's it. Now, to add the rhythm. To play A Horse with No Name, we need a shuffle rhythm. To start with, let's just strum down, down, up, down, up, down, 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 up, down, up, down, 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 up, down, up, down, 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 up, down, up, down. What makes that a shuffle rhythm is that we're dividing the beat in two. 1, 2, 3, 4, but we're doing it unevenly. In other words, what we would call a straight rhythm is an absolutely even subdivision of the beat. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4. That's not the right sound for this song. Listen to the difference. Here's straight. 2, 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4. Now here comes shuffle. 2 and 3 and 4. 1, 2 and 3 and 4. I did not change the tempo. My foot is tapping at the same speed. Straight. Notice the pulse. Shuffle. It can feel like it's moving faster, but it's not. We just have a longer downstroke and a shorter upstroke. Some people find that it's helpful to think something like this. I would do this with kids. Humpty Dumpty, Humpty Dumpty, Humpty Dumpty, Humpty Dumpty. Some people find it useful, appropriately enough, since the song is called A Horse with No Name, to think about riding a horse. Sort of a, I guess it would be a canter. I don't know enough about riding horses. Clip, clop, clip, clop, clip, clop, clip, clop, clip, clop, clip, clop. Or you can just think of it as a bounce. It has a sense of lift to it. Notice that the right hand, the strumming hand, is just going back and forth. It's mostly coming from my arm, and the movement is lead from the fingertips, a small rotation on the way down, and on the way back up, I'm really just brushing the treble strings. I'm not trying to hit everything, because that sounds like this, which is not right. It's clunky and it's cumbersome. So all you're looking for really is to think of this as your starting point, 0, and then the upstroke is just returning to 0. If you play repeated downstrokes, you don't think about up at all. 1, 2, 3, 4. So all I'm going to change is I'm going to hit the strings on the way up. One, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So the simplest way to play this would just be like this. Play along with me if you can. 1, 2, 3, 4. Down, down, up, down, up, down, and down. So notice I'm changing chords on an 8th note, 2 and 3 and 4, and 1, 2 and 3 and 4. A little faster. That's it. Now, here's a variation on that strum. Which is closer to what they actually play. Two things I want you to notice. Dividing the guitar up into bass side on the thicker, low-sounding strings, lower pitch strings, and treble side, thinner, higher pitch strings, and also moving the hand a little more so I get all the way across, And that puts a natural accent. So I'm not necessarily hitting harder, I'm just moving more. 1, 2, 3, 4. So notice less, more, less, more. Here's the other thing I'm doing. On the second chord, I'm playing a syncopated rhythm. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. But notice how my right hand, my strumming hand, is really doing the same thing it was before. I'm just not hitting the strings every time, and I'm not hitting them with the same amount of force. Listen to this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So the rhythm is da 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 da. Down, up and up, up, down. Down, up and up, up, down. And I might brush. Down, up, brush, up, up, down. And the brush is just lightly hitting the bass strings only. That's a little more challenging, so if you're a total beginner, you might have a harder time with that, but know that this is something you're going to head towards. Down, up, brush, up, down. Down, up, brush, up, down. Now, one other little detail. On the brush, I'm adding a little percussion by releasing the pressure in my left hand, in my fretting hand. So I'm still touching the strings, I'm just not holding them down. It's this. Now, it doesn't stop all the strings from ringing because there are open strings in there, but it stops enough of them that when the pick comes down, we hear a little bit of click. Now, also, if I'm careful to flatten a little bit, I can muffle everything, but we don't really need that necessarily. So to isolate this thing, you can practice strum, release, click. You see how my fingers are turning a little bit to muffle, but you don't even really need to do that. You can just release the pressure. You still get that percussive element from the pick hitting those thicker strings, even though there's other notes ringing. When we put all of this together, here's what we get. 1, 2, 3, 4. Down, up, 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 down. Down, up, down, up, down. Down, up, brush, up.
I've been through the desert on a horse with no name. Felt good to be out of the rain. In the desert, you can remember your name, 'cause there ain't no one for to give you no pain.
Da, dee, da, da. That is the entire song. So to recap, the simplest thing to do is just to look at simple E minor with middle and ring on fret 2, 5th string, 4th string, strum all of the strings, down, down, up, down, up, down. Remembering that we're leading the strum with the fingertips, but the arm follows. There's a little bit of a turn as I'm going down and back in up. Remembering that the upstroke, you do not need to hit all the strings, but just lightly brush the trebles. And then the chord change is move the two fingers away from each other in opposite directions so that we go from strings 5 and 4 to strings 6 and 3. That you think about when you're changing, and you change by releasing, seeing the target note, and then going there, landing on the fingertips, the wrist stays relaxed, the thumb just kind of floats, not really applying any pressure. The curled fingers take care of that. Here it is. 1, 2, 3, 4. And remembering the strum, shuffle rhythm. Humpty Dumpty, Humpty Dumpty, bum-ba-dee-da, bum-ba-dee-da. Whatever it takes for you to feel that. Short, long, short, long, short, long. Or just up, 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 up. Feeling that bounce. And then this syncopated rhythm is down, up, click, up, down, up, click, up, down, and down, up, click, up, down. One more time, here it is all together. simpler beginner version. For practicing, 1, 2, 3, land, 1, 2, 3, land. Back to simple strum, 2, 3, 4. And a little more involved. So I hope you can recognize how even with such a simple song, we can approach it different ways, focusing on the absolute basics for a complete beginner, and focusing on actually a great deal of subtlety for someone who's been playing for a while and is looking to make their strumming more interesting, more dynamic, more dimensional. So consider this the latest entry in the Essential Songs series, and it really is the song that I teach beginners first. It's the very first thing that we go to in terms of working with chords and strumming. So I hope you enjoyed this lesson. I'm confident there's a lot you can get out of this, no matter really where you are, because as I said, we can go from simple to more advanced and more subtle. I'm Dave Isaacs from the New Guitar Studio here in Sobro in Nashville. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. If you don't subscribe to this channel, please do, and please comment. I love to hear from you. See you at the next video.